I'm Sarai.
And I'm Haley.
And this is Seamwork Radio. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Seamwork Radio this week. So today we're talking about how and why you might want to create a personal sewing challenge for yourself. So we're going to cover my own personal sewing challenge and why I've decided to take one on, how personal sewing challenges can change your perspective on things like your identity, your life, and really so much more. And we're also going to be sharing some tips for creating your own challenge if it's something that you're interested in doing. So I'm really excited to talk about this today because it's been heavily on my mind lately. And I'm wondering, Haley, have you ever done a big personal challenge around sewing?
Ooh, I always like a mini challenge just because I feel like it keeps my creativity a little bit more fresh. And I tend to bounce around a lot from idea to idea and project to project. And that's something I've learned to embrace about myself. But I definitely challenge myself to try new types of projects and sewing techniques often, but never in this kind of big way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think they can be really inspiring and helpful. And I'm inspired by the one I'm starting right now, which we're going to be talking about in a few minutes in a pretty big way. The only challenge that I've really given myself that I think would be like a big sewing challenge, or at least sewing adjacent challenge, is I did a year of not buying any new clothes. This was quite a long time ago. So this was something that was kind of going around on blogs back in the day. And I don't remember what it was called. I think it had a name and you could sign up and pledge the challenge for different periods of time. So you could do 3 months or 6 months or a year. And I started out doing just, I think, 3 months of not buying any new clothes. So the idea was that everything would be either made by you or it would be secondhand. And after 3 months, I enjoyed it so much that I kept going, and I ended up doing it for a year. And I learned so much from that whole experience. It really taught me how little I really need, first of all. It broke some bad habits of doing a lot of online shopping and kind of shopping for entertainment. I think that was a habit that I'd gotten into when I worked years before that, when I worked in retail and there were a lot of stores around all the time. You know, I worked in a retail store and in different, shopping areas. And they were just like, that's what you would do on your lunch break, is go around and walk around and look at the shops. And I think that then translated into internet shopping later on. And not that I've ever had a huge problem with it, but I think it really taught me some new ways of looking at my wardrobe and the things I own, and gave me some new skills. So that was really inspiring for me. But I haven't really done a big sewing challenge since then, or anything related to sewing like that. But like you, I've done smaller things, smaller challenges. So I'm really excited. If any of you have done a big sewing challenge, then maybe you could tell us about it. Hashtag it Icebreakers for Makers is our icebreaker question of the week. So if you've ever done a big personal sewing challenge, let us know about it and what you got out of it. We'd love to hear about it. So we are right now, as we are releasing this episode, so we're recording this a couple weeks early, but as this episode is coming out, we're in the 3rd week of Design Your Wardrobe, which is our big twice annual class that we do to help you design and put together a wardrobe for the season. And we've got a great group. There's been, even now, we're in the very beginnings of it as we're recording, but there's been a lot of great conversation coming out of it already. And it's really fun. But we're in the 3rd week as we're releasing this, and the 3rd week really focuses on putting together your final outfits and setting up your sewing queue. So I thought this would be a great time to talk about the way I'm using Design Your Wardrobe this session, which is to plan for my own personal sewing goal. And it's a project that I'm calling the Decade Project. And the idea behind it is that I would like to make 5 garments that I believe that I'm going to wear for the next 10 years or beyond 10 years. And that is something that I'm really excited about because I think it's really going to change my perspective on what I make. So I'm super excited about it. I need to post about it in the community because I haven't done that yet.
Yeah. you've told me a little bit about it, and it just seems like I'm super inspired by it. I can't wait to see what you make.
I can't wait to see what I make. I should share about it on the podcast as I go along.
Yeah, you should. I bet people would like to hear the updates. I want to hear them.
Yeah.
I want to hear about like why, more of the why behind this decade project. What inspired you to do this?
So, as you know, Haley, I am going through a big change in my life right now, which is that we are in the process of selling our house in Portland, and we just moved to the country. So we're in a new house that is pretty remote. I was just telling Haley right before we started recording, there's this big stag or maybe a buck, I don't know. He's outside, I don't know, a male deer, whatever you call a male deer. He's outside our window right now, luckily not in my garden, but kind of out in the more wildernessy area, just bedding down in the grass. And it's so cool. There's just like wildlife all around. There's so many different critters that are around our house now. So anyway, life has changed pretty dramatically for me in the last couple months. And I'm sure that's true for a lot of people as we've gone through the pandemic. A lot of people have had huge, huge life changes. Probably most people have. And so one of the things that really struck me is this feeling that I am starting really a new chapter in my life. And I was reading this book recently, which is about memory, and it's called Adventures in Memory. It's a great book. It's really interesting. It's all about how memory works. And one of the things that I remember from that book is they were talking about the fact that we really, in our brains, we construct a story out of our lives, something that they call a life script. And in this way that we frame our lives as kind of a narrative, there are distinct chapters in our life. So it's really how we think about our lives is in terms of like a book with chapters in it. And when you enter a new chapter in your life, it completely changes the way you process memories, the way you think about your past, and for me at least, the way I think about my future as well. So I've really noticed this in myself that as we've made this big change, it's made me, first of all, very nostalgic for the past. It's made me really think about all the different phases of my life and the different places I've lived and people I've been, really, the different identities I've had at different parts of my life. And now that I'm entering this new chapter, I'm thinking about who I'm going to be in this chapter. Who am I going to be in 10 years or 15 years or 20 years? And that thought experiment has really been inspiring to me and really interesting to me. And then the other thing, so I think there are two factors. That's the first one. And then the second one is that when you're moving, I think we've all found this when you're moving, you just realize how much stuff you have and how much of it is so unnecessary. Both when you're packing, and it's a huge pain in the butt to pack all this stuff that you don't really need. And then when you're unpacking and most of your stuff is in boxes, but you're really only using things that are coming out of a few boxes, and everything else you can put it off because you don't really use it that much. And so it really made me think about my wardrobe, and especially now that I have this more rural lifestyle, how much of it I'm really probably not going to wear very much. And so, yeah, I'm just thinking about the utility of my clothing. What do I actually need? What's actually going to be functional for me, and what that's going to look like as I get older. So that's sort of my reasoning behind it.
I really liked when you brought up nostalgia, and then kind of in contrast to this nostalgic, feeling that you're sitting in, having this very forward-looking goal in mind. It makes me kind of wonder, how do you feel when you sit in nostalgia?
It's interesting because I think nostalgia or thinking about your past really can transform the way you think about your identity and also who you're going to be going forward. I think it really, those memories and the way you process them and the way you really construct a story around them can have such a big influence. So I think that when you go through periods of nostalgia and really thinking about who you've been in the past, it can really be a powerful exercise, I think, in the decisions you make going forward.
Mm-hmm.
So I think in Design Your Wardrobe, we talk about this a little bit. We talk about how your history can inform your own sense of who you are and your personal style, among other things. So I think it's always good when you're in these periods of transition to use them as an opportunity to really think more deeply about bigger questions in your life and who you are.
Yeah, I've noticed for myself personally that nostalgia can be this like really fine line between kind of like a wallowing and then like a more productive reflection. And to me, what I've identified to be the key difference is when I use it as a tool to think about the present and the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely the case for me too.
Yeah. So, how has planning for this challenge changed your perspective? It must be, major.
Yeah, I think, well, one of the things that I mentioned is utility in my clothing. And that's something that's become very important to me. I think having garments that are going to last is something that I've been thinking about. So
Mm-hmm.
for this decade project, really thinking about what are the pieces that I believe I'm going to be able to have for the next 10 years and beyond has made me think about, well, what types of garments tend to last? What types of garments can stand the test of time in just like a basic physical way? So,
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that I was thinking about, we were talking about this a little bit, Haley, when we were planning this episode together, is I wear a lot of t-shirts. I wear a lot of white t-shirts. I like to wear white generally. And they just never last for me because they
Mm-hmm.
always get stains and, yellowing in the armpits and
Yep.
just like I can't have them for that long. And that's just kind of a part. You can clean them to some extent, protect them to some extent, but I'm not gonna have a white t-shirt that lasts for 10 years. So thinking about the types of garments that do last and that don't last, things like outerwear is probably something that you're
Mm-hmm.
going to have for a really long time. Maybe a really sturdy pair of pants, or things that are constructed in really sturdy fabrics. So just kind of thinking about the idea of lasting clothes, and lasting was our theme for a recent month of seam work. That really got me thinking about this concept of clothes that last. So that's one thing that this project has inspired in me. And then the next thing that I've noticed is really identifying what's a trend and what's not a trend. And you'd think that would be really easy, but it's not always. Well, there are things that started out as trends, I think, in the past that have become just, staples in people's wardrobes today. And that's kind of how fashion works. And so sometimes it can be hard to identify what is just a trend that's going to pass after a year, 2 years, 3 years, and what is something that is just something that, is new, maybe, but it's not necessarily going to be something that you're going to look back on and think, oh, why was I wearing that?
Totally.
So I've been thinking about that because I personally, I like things that one of the trends right now is, things that are romantic and have a lot of ruffles and kind of bohemian styling. And that's something that I really like to incorporate in my wardrobe, but it is a trend right now. That's caused me to think about, well, what are the aspects of that I've been wearing just for years and years and years before this was a trend?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that gives you hints. Again, that's the thing, looking towards the past to think about your future. I think that gives me some hints about, I've always liked like really Victorian blouses and not costumey things, but things that have those heirloom sort of touches to them. I've always liked, bias cut slip dresses, for example. I've been wearing those since the 90s and now they're back in fashion. And
Yeah.
I'll probably still love them. I'll love them forever because I've been wearing them forever. So things like that. Yeah, identifying trends, it's surprisingly difficult. Do you feel that way when you look at, because you look at way more trends than I do just for your
Oh
job?
gosh. You know what though? I feel like having being a designer makes me almost more personally adverse to trends than maybe other people because I really like immerse myself in all of the stuff that's going on in trends and ready to wear when I'm coming up with designs and try to be really aware of them. And sometimes just being so exposed to them can kind of just turn you off. I feel like for me, observing trends kind of seats me deeper in my own personal style for sure. And then when there's a trend that emerges that is something that already is part of my style identity, then that's kind of fun to play with that a little bit more. And then more patterns start cropping up and that kind of thing. But I don't know. I guess I kind of get turned off by some of the stuff now.
Yeah.
Just overexposure.
That makes sense. I mean, if you look at most famous fashion designers, they all had not all, but most had a very, very specific look to the way they dress personally and don't deviate from that or, really follow trends, which is,
Yeah, and I like to explore them in designs. I think that that's really fun, but for me, it's just personally is kind of an interesting mirror to look at, to examine, just like what you're doing now. Is that something that I like because I see it all the time and my eyeballs are getting used to looking at it? Or is it something that really resonates with me?
Yeah. It's really interesting to look at it through that lens. If you're looking at Pinterest or you're looking at, maybe Vogue.com or something and thinking about, which are the things that are really reflective of who I am as a person and which are the things that I'm just being told to like in a way.
Yeah, definitely.
Just through exposure. Those are the first two things. So finding garments that last or thinking about garments that will really last, and then thinking about what is a trend and what's really true to who I am. And then the third thing that I've really noticed in thinking about this project is the idea of aging and thinking about, who I'm going to be in 10 years. So I just turned 41 and so I'll be in my early 50s in 10 years. And who's that person going to be? Who do I imagine her to be? What is she going to dress like? What is she going to look like? I have a much clearer idea of who I want to be as a human being, character-wise, than I do as what I'm going to look like or dress like. And I think that's probably a good thing. But I was thinking about this because I was looking at different, styles and thinking about the projects that I'd want to make. And I thought, well, should I make things that are sleeveless? Because I think, a lot of women in their 50s, they don't really like to show their arms that much. And then I caught myself and I was like, wait, why do I think I'm going to be ashamed of my arms in 10 years? Why do I have this idea that I should be ashamed of my arms in 10 years? And it's because I hear that all the time. I hear that message constantly. We hear it from customers a lot. I don't want to show this part of my body because I'm over X age. And, I totally get that. I'm not saying that that's invalid. You show your body in whatever way makes you happy. But hearing that message over and over just made me think, oh, well, I should probably feel that way too. When I'm over a certain age, it's going to be inappropriate for me to show my knee or show my arm, And I had to catch myself because, I don't feel that way. I don't hate my arms at all. I have very strong arms and I really like them. So it really, that was probably the most powerful moment for me in thinking about this, is just the influence of those kinds of messages and my concept of aging. So isn't that interesting? I never would have thought that I would feel that way. That I would even tell myself that,
Yeah, I definitely have bumped up against that. I'm 31 and I had this moment a couple of years ago where I was like, oh, dang, am I too old to wear that? Or am I it was the first time in my life that I started questioning my ability to pull something off. But every time I find myself, I definitely find myself falling into those like thinking patterns. And I'm like, screw that. I'll wear crop tops if I want to. I'm going to let it hang free to the day I die.
I know. It's really interesting. I've had those thoughts, like passing thoughts occasionally about wearing shorts because I wear a lot of shorts in the summer and thought, well, maybe, when you get to a certain age. And then I thought, why? Why do I believe that?
Yeah, that.
That's ridiculous. It's not even me personally saying, oh, I don't like my legs. It's me personally saying, it's just saying like, oh, I've heard that you shouldn't show this part of your body after this random number,
Yeah, totally. So. Now with having a daughter, I feel like it's even like more an intentional thing. I try to like purposefully rebel against. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna wear this crop top and just let her see that I don't care. Because
that's awesome.
I don't want her to care.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. She's going to be such a strong lady growing up with those messages.
Oh my gosh, she's already, she's willful. I love it.
She's her own person. As she should be.
Absolutely.
So that's what I've gotten out of this one so far, and I haven't even started sewing yet. So I'm sure that I will have many other revelations as we go along. But I really just wanted to throw this out here to share with everybody how crafting these challenges for yourself that are meaningful to you can really help to shift your perspective. It's not just about making more garments or motivating yourself to sew, which I think challenges can really do that for you. Group challenges, I think, are super motivating as well. But they can also really shift your perspective and really change the way you think about your clothing and your sewing practice and the material items in your life. And even your life and your identity, which is it has for me. So if you are interested in doing something like this, you could definitely join me and do the Decade Project with me if you want. I will post about it in the Seamwork community.
Yeah.
I'll create a thread and maybe a sewing goal for myself around that if anybody else wants to join me on that one. But if you have a different goal in mind or a different project in mind, some of my tips for crafting your own challenge would be first to just think about your outcome and why you want to do it. So if it's like me, maybe you're in a period of transition and you're really thinking about the future in a broader way. So maybe that's your why is, really thinking about this next period of your life. So that would be my why for my personal challenge. But maybe you have a different why. Maybe you are in a period where you have maybe just had a baby and you need to craft a new wardrobe around that experience. Or maybe you just want to pare down the number of things that you make or own. Or maybe you want to increase the number of quick and easy projects because you think that will be really motivating for you to sew more often. So whatever your personal goal is, just think about what the outcome is. Maybe just write that down before you even start, because I think that can be really motivating to you to come back to that why. So that would be my first tip. And then once you do that, I think it's important for these kinds of projects to really have a specific goal in mind for yourself. And that's not just to flagellate yourself if you don't make your goal. It's not, something that you need to be super strict with. But I think just having a very specific goal in mind can help you to stay on track with that why, that outcome that you're looking for. It just gives you something to shoot for. And I think that's really, for me, it's something that is very motivating to have concrete steps to take towards this larger goal. So you could use a system like SMART goals for this. So if you're not familiar with SMART goals, SMART stands for specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and time-bound. So a SMART goal is specific. So it is very specific to what you're actually trying to achieve. So it's not some vague goal. It's measurable. So there's a way for you to say that, yes, I did this, I accomplished this, or I didn't accomplish this. It's actionable. So it's something that you can actually take action on. It's realistic. So it's something that you can achieve, and it's time bound. So it has an actual time frame to it. It's not just, I'm going to do this into forever. It's maybe a 6 weeks challenge, or it could be a 1 year challenge, but it has a specific time to it. So I think that's really helpful for coming up with your framework around this challenge. So identify your outcome, why you want to do it, create specific, measurable, and time-bound goals around your outcome. And then the last tip that has been helpful to me so far as we've gone through beginnings of Design Your Wardrobe is just to share it and to tell a story about it to other people and for yourself. I think crafting a story around this journey that you're doing, if it's a really short journey, even if it's, a 4-week challenge or a 6-week challenge for yourself, I think just telling that story really helps you to think through the changes that it's inspiring in you and different ways of thinking about these things. For me, writing is a very powerful process in actually creating my thoughts, like actually figuring out what I think.
Mm-hmm.
It could be writing, or it could be just sharing photos and, quick notes or something. It doesn't have to be a novel by any means. But I think just some way of sharing your story is very powerful in thinking through whatever project you're doing with this. So you could tell that story in the Seamwork community. You could share it there. You could share it on social media. You could just share it with friends if you have sewing friends in real life, or even non-sewing friends. But I think having a place to share what you're learning from this experience can really help you to get more out of it. So those are my 3 tips. I think that's what I've learned so far. I might have more as I go through this actual challenge, though.
I know. When you complete your 5th garment, we should do a follow-up episode.
Yeah. One thing I was debating is how many garments should it be? I thought about doing 10, 10 for 10 years. And I realized that's a little bit too big for me to tackle, because I'm going to want to sew other things. And
yeah,
I'm not a really prolific sewer. I like to sew slowly and make things that are, really going to contribute to my life. So 10 just seemed like maybe a little too much.
Yeah, it's that R and smart, that realistic,
Yeah.
Got to keep it realistic.
Yeah.
All right. So we covered a lot of ground in this episode. And the main inspiration and topic of discussion was Sarai's decade.
The decade project.
And maybe it'll be decades. I don't know.
Maybe it'll be decades, yeah.
Right now, it's a decade project where she is challenging herself to sew 5 garments that she will want to wear in 10 years from now. Through that discussion, we talked about how it's changed her perspective and the big why behind why she's doing that, which was inspired by her big move out to the country and her new lifestyle. Sarai also shared her top 3 tips for developing an effective challenge for yourself. So the first one is to identify your outcome and your why. Make it meaningful, because the more meaningful this is to you, the more likely it is to stick. She also suggested SMART goals as a good way for kind of thinking about your challenge. So SMART stands for specific, make that goal specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, which is why it is 5 garments and not 10, and time bound. Give yourself a time limit that you want to accomplish your goal in. And then her third goal is to share it, either with a friend, family, on the Seamwork community, on social media. It has been proven that sharing your goals makes it way more likely that you will achieve them. So share. Yell it from the rooftops.
Why not?
Yeah, I mean, your neighbors may not like it, but if you live out in the country like Sarai, it doesn't matter. You'll just scare the deer away.
Yeah, tell the gopher and the squirrels.
Yeah. If you love this topic and you want to learn more about it, definitely go check out the goals feature on the Seamwork community. It's a really cool feature we have where you can set your goals and mark some milestones for yourself. If you're a person who loves a checklist and like the satisfying moment of checking something off of your checklist, like I am,
that's me.
Then this is something. I mean, who doesn't like that? It's so lovable. Then the goals feature is something that I think you will really love. Of course, design your wardrobe. I think we rep design your wardrobe in like nearly every episode, but design your wardrobe is really great for kind of curating your plans and in turn kind of coming up with some ideas for sewing goals for yourself. And the sewing planner, we have a Seamwork sewing planner that's really great for planning out your sewing projects. So definitely check that out. We'll link all of these things in the show notes. And just kind of like a final note on personal sewing challenges. Personal sewing challenges, even though they can be really great for your sewing productivity, the main thing that we're hoping you'll get, and we think that you'll get out of a personal sewing challenge is to like enrich your sewing practice and give your sewing practice a little bit more of an intentional edge and hopefully reach your sewing goals. So ultimately, we'd like to invite you to not get caught up in the physical thing that you're making, but your big why, your why behind why you sew, and ultimately your goals. So that's kind of like a little final parting note for you. If you liked this episode, please, 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 I'm not too proud to beg, leave us a review. It helps us to know that you like it, what you want to hear more of. And Sarai and I just always love reading your reviews. We truly do. We read every single one of them.
Yeah, I check them all the time. I'm like, ooh, we got a new one. It's fun to read them. And yeah, we definitely want to hear your ideas. If you have an idea for a future episode, post a review and let us know what you want to hear more of.
Yeah, we'll shout you out in the episode.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye. Seamwork Radio is brought to you by the team at Seamwork. Seamwork's an online community that supports you in creating a wardrobe that feels right for you. When you join us at Seamwork, you become part of our private community of makers, and you also get access to monthly sew-along classes, a library of over 200 sewing patterns, and tons of great resources to help guide you through the sewing adventure that you choose. Podcast listeners can get half off a Seamwork Unlimited membership, which means you can download as many of those 200 plus patterns as you want at any time, and our community will be there to guide and support you. If you'd like to join us for half off, just visit seamwork.com/go/podcast50. You can also find us on Instagram at Seamwork or visit our YouTube channel, which is called Seamwork Video. We love hearing from you, so let us know if there's a topic or a personal story that you'd like us to cover. Thanks for listening to Seamwork Radio.